What's good in the YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing you a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce episode 18, and this episode was really good. We got a guest star this episode, which I'm very happy about. We haven't had a guest star since episode 11 now, so it's been definitely quite a few weeks since we've had one, because I don't count Joe as a guest star. For those that are wondering, does Joe count as a guest star? No, he's not a guest star, and it's not clear as to whether or not he's actually officially going to be the Sixth Ranger, but he's definitely not a guest star. That is something that I will say seems to be true. Now, what I will say that I want to start off with is not about the episode itself, but is about announcements that were made today during the episode. What we start off with learning is that next week's episode will be based in the Shattered Grid universe. Shattered Grid, for those who do not know, is based off of the Boom Comics, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics. That they're releasing a 2-comic release, which will be celebrating the 25th anniversary. It'll be a unique comic that will have Rangers from various iterations of the series. It will be a unique spin on the comics, and it's something that's very exciting. So for those of you that read those comics, definitely something to look forward to, both for those that are into Hyperforce and just in general are looking forward to Shattered Grid. Definitely not a bad thing to get a taste for it from this episode next week, because it will be themed in that universe, and so there will actually be interactions between the Shattered Grid characters and these Rangers. Again, we don't know if that actually will translate into the actual comics themselves. That's the hope. Hopefully at some point that they will actually include the Hyperforce Rangers somehow. We don't know yet if that will be the case. That'd be amazing if it turns out to be that way. But, we'll have to wait and see. What we also learned about next episode is that apparently Kyle Higgins, the writer behind the Boom Studios Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics, will actually be a guest star in next week's episode. So that's something to look forward to. And I'm sure he'll be ready to answer some questions about the Boom Studios comics and just kind of, it's a good opportunity for all of you that love the Boom comics, because, the Boom comics are really, really good. Great time to just kind of thank him, If you're someone that really loves them, don't be afraid, Write in, say you love this stuff, and, he'll appreciate the fact that you love it, because that makes him happy. That makes him know that he's doing his job right, and people are enjoying something that he's a big part of. What we also learned is that next week there will... Actually, I don't remember if... I think it's next week. It's supposed to be soon, that there's supposed to be WonderCon. WonderCon is going to actually have a Shattered Grid panel with Kyle Higgins and a number of other people from the Boom Studios staff. So if you want to learn more about Shattered Grid, if you want to meet the people behind it, definitely a good opportunity for that. Also at WonderCon, there's going to be a point where they're going to actually have the Hyperforce cast signing a special Go-Go Power Rangers Comic 8 variant that's going to have the Hyperforce Rangers cover art, which is very, very exciting. It's going to be a special cover tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I believe. We are supposed to actually get the image of what the cover art's going to look like from Strawberry 17, the person who plays Chloe in Power Rangers Hyperforce. So look forward to that tomorrow. It will be on our Instagram, so that's very, very exciting. Those things happened. We also learned, apparently, I think I forgot to mention this, for episode 19, which will be next week's episode with the Shattered Grid and everything, that Malika, who plays the DM or the GM for Power Rangers Hyperforce, will not be the GM. Instead, she will actually be playing the game next week. So that's very cool. And instead, the GM will actually be Zach. So Zach's going to take over. And people are kind of scared about that, because Zach is notorious for being known to cause a lot of trouble and practically kill these Rangers. Not just specifically the Hyperforce Rangers, but just in general. When he GMs, he's known for being a bit brutal, and it's fitting with the comics, because the thing that it's been said to go by is, no Ranger is safe. So they kind of put, who's the one person that's a GM that we could put in that fits that? Zach. And people know Zach because Zach's been in multiple episodes doing several minor roles. So that's kind of interesting. Definitely something to look forward to. It will definitely be an interesting spin because of the fact that he is going to be leading this. And the thing is that also I'm very, very interested in seeing how things will work out next episode. We also have no idea what Malika's role will be next episode, but we'll have to wait and see. So, yes, big announcements, all that happened. Let's get started with the actual episode itself because there's a lot of stuff that happened in this. For starters, as I said before, there was a guest star. The guest star was Cameron Jebbo, who played Orion in Power Rangers Super Mega Force. He was the Silver Super Mega Force Ranger, which is very exciting. This episode was very cool because it didn't just take place in one time period for Cameron Jebbo. It actually took place in two. One being after his village was destroyed and they were still on the planet, and also during the legendary battle. So very, very cool to know that that was the case this episode. I was actually very happy and a little surprised because most episodes it's only been one era. So it was kind of cool to see them actually do both and then kind of see like what happens after the things that occur in the beginning. And it kind of relates to what happened in the SPD era, because in SPD there was, stuff regarding Lena's song, and then we ended up seeing later on that they had to fight the A Squad Rangers, and then they met Lena's song and she became the Green SPD Ranger. So in other words, it's sort of like they're showing continuity and they're showing like, oh, this happened in the past, so this is what happens now, and it shows the events that lead up to that, which is kind of cool. And it's also interesting because, with her character, she was an original character. In Orion's case, it's very different because he's an actual ranger that's known for the Power Rangers series in general. So that's kind of different, and I actually appreciate that they actually had a cause and effect situation, which really worked well. So the episode itself actually starts off with the Rangers actually deciding to head down to... Well, actually what happens is that, they have to go to this planet to deal with the Armada. What actually happens is that they're not really sure of everything. They know the Armada actually destroyed several people, and it led to a major battle with legendary Rangers and all that. And the thing that they end up doing is they have to be mindful of the timeline so that they don't affect it in any serious way. So again, they're going to deal with the Armada. Alpha 55 mentions the Rangers... a ranger from the planet Andrasia that lived there, and he was known as Orion. So they hope to learn something from Orion without giving everything away about themselves. So that's important. And they want to learn about the Armada, obviously, because he dealt with them. So that's very fitting. So what does end up happening is that the Rangers do travel through time. They head to Andrasia, where they end up meeting Orion. He lost his family, of course, and this is after his family was lost and his home village was destroyed. The Rangers do travel down. They end up eventually deciding to actually come across as Time Force officers, which really doesn't really matter in his case because he doesn't really know what the Power Rangers are in reality because it's not something that's common knowledge to him. So what does end up happening is that they meet him. He ends up being this guy who actually has like a spear and he's been catching fish. And he's just some guy that they end up meeting on a beach and things are interesting. We also see that as they end up heading to speak to him and all that stuff happens, they do end up introducing themselves. Initially, he speaks in his own dialect, and it doesn't work out very well, where like no one can understand him. But Vesper has something in her memory banks that allows her to adjust to his language, so she ends up getting that fixed, and then it goes into all their morphers, allowing everyone to speak to him in his native tongue. So that's very important. Of course, we hear it in English, but yes, that does end up happening. So eventually we see how he acts, and as far as things go, he's pretty interesting. We do learn about the ships and the different soldiers and lasers. Orion tells the Rangers where to find the Armada ships to help that tells the Rangers where to find the other Armada ships to help Earth, obviously, because that's their goal. And Orion goes afterwards to go catch some fish, because some fish actually appear before him. He misses, but then eventually the Rangers introduce themselves, and when Eddie introduces himself, he says, "Hi, I'm Eddie," and then he stabs his trident into the water, catches 2 fish, and gives them to Orion, and then Orion loves him for that. People were kind of treating that as though there's actually some romance there. I mean, obviously it's a one-time thing. It's never going to be brought up again past this, but it is interesting to see. There's some favoritism here. Orion does end up cooking the fish. Eventually the Rangers head into the forest because that's where they're told that the ships will be. They do also suggest going towards some quarries, because the planet that Orion lived on was a mining planet, specifically for the villagers that he was with. And the thing is that they were wondering if the materials that the Armada was looking for were the things that whatever the Armada was looking for, was it the same materials that Orion had? Because the thing is that he was a miner, and it's unclear as to what they were searching for this whole entire time. Now, obviously you would suspect maybe it's the legendary morpher that he has. It's not very clear ever, and they really don't address specifically what it is, but who knows exactly right now. What we do end up seeing is that eventually the weather does look bad. It starts to rain pretty badly, and the Rangers end up deciding to duck into a cave to keep themselves dry. So following this, what we do end up hearing is that Marv suggests nabbing one of the Armada ships to chase the Armada and do that. And Orion wants to do that. Eventually when the Rangers do head into the cave, Eddie starts a fire to keep them all warm, and Vesper suggests ways to get revenge for Orion against the Armada is to use the Vengeance virus through the ships to destroy them and lead it so that there won't be any problems and they can stop future conflicts and destroy the Armada quickly. So that's an interesting plan with the Vengeance virus. I do like the fact that they're actually referencing something from a previous episode. That's kind of cool, and I actually really think that's a great idea. So that's neat to see. What we do end up seeing also is that Orion suggests the idea of infecting a robot soldier, and that's another thought, but that doesn't actually happen. They decide eventually to go Vesper's plan, although it does take some time. Eventually, Marv and Eddie have this one-on-one conversation together where they just kind of try to comfort each other and make each other feel better. Specifically Eddie, just because Eddie feels like everyone's hanging with each other, but Eddie feels alone, and he feels like he's not in the best place right now, especially with the current situation regarding Vesper and himself, because in the previous episode, as we know, they separated. So that's interesting, of course. What we do end up also seeing is that, Marv mentions the whole aspect of, as much as everyone's hanging with each other, it's because of you that we are able to do this now. You made it possible for us to feel like we can trust each other and feel good about this stuff. So that's really important. I actually love that whole aspect. That conversation was a very sweet one. Jack and Orion also have a conversation, which is interesting, and Jack explains the whole aspect of their mission being something that could affect the entire fate of the universe, and that's a big deal, of course. But Orion does get a pretty good understanding of things. As I said before, the conversation continues with Marvin, Eddie. What else can I say? Orion's morpher does glow, and they eventually head back to the group. What does end up happening from here? Eventually, Orion explains to the Rangers about prior to the attack, while Orion was mining, he ended up finding this morpher that was silver and gold with immense power, and he ended up using it only once, but it freaked him out the first time he actually used it. He doesn't know its power. Thing is that Eddie does know its power. He knows that the little figures that he actually had to use to transform, those are Ranger keys, and the thing is that there are several other ones, and it will allow him to unlock some pretty special abilities. So he's just a really important character, obviously, Orion. And obviously fans of Super Mega Force and just people that watch Super Mega Force know exactly what that really means. So what does end up happening is that, Vesper does have a record of the virus, because eventually they decide that they're going to actually try to deal with things even further. And, Orion initially isn't really sure about being a ranger, but the others try to really make him feel more comfortable, make him feel like, being a ranger is not a bad thing. It's something that you should be happy and look forward to being. Eventually, what does end up happening is that, like, Vesper and Chloe, by the way, are outside. They're in the rain. They're just kind of together, and that's about it. Vesper and Chloe discuss different things regarding the viruses, and Vesper feels like she's changed a lot ever since the Vengeance virus entered her body, and so she feels like, it's really affected her in a big way. Eventually, the Rangers, Marv contacts Vesper and Chloe to say, hey, we're gonna discuss some things, you should come in, and Vesper and Chloe end up heading back. In the meantime, as they're heading back, Chloe runs ahead, but Vesper notices at one point that there's an armada of ships appearing, 3 to be exact, that are passing by. So at that point, what does end up happening is that she ends up contacting the others. They end up meeting at the entrance of the cave, and they then begin their trip towards where the armada ships appear typically in the jungle. So they end up heading up through the quarry and then eventually through the jungles to actually come to where this to where these armada ships appear. They head there, and what we do end up seeing is that they follow a smoke trail, and eventually when they get to the top, Chloe and Eddie end up using their what happens is that the other 5 Rangers, because Chloe's actually transformed already, but the other 5 Rangers, including Orion, finally get to transform. So we do get to see Orion transform, which is very cool. And what does end up happening is that Chloe and Eddie do their combination of a whirlwind attack, a hurricane whirlwind attack, and a big water attack to create some sort of water spout to actually capture one of the armada ships in it and bring it down to the ground, and then eventually it falls into the beach. So at that point, what does end up happening is that the Rangers do a power jump towards the ship. They end up examining it, finding out that the ship is pretty badly damaged. It's a 1-passenger ship, and it's not terrible, but it's not in the best shape ever. So what does end up happening is that Vesper works on the inside while Eddie works on the outside. Vesper works on the interior wiring while Eddie works on the turbines. So that's kind of interesting. Also, Jack gets involved in it as well, fixing the propellers to the turbines. So, everyone's doing something, although Marv and Chloe really aren't doing as much. But there's still work being done, and, the work isn't too time. It doesn't take too much time overall. Also, the actual pilot for the Armada ship gets taken out at one point, so that's important as well. And eventually, after everything is said and done, what does end up happening is that after they fix everything, they end up heading back to. What happens is that they say their goodbyes because fixing everything doesn't take too long, and things move fairly quickly. But at the same time, Marv does speak to Orion, basically saying just make sure not to tell anyone about us. Make up your own story about how you got off of your planet, how you got this Armada ship. Even mention a bow or something like that. Just remember, we don't exist. You might have seen us, but we don't know each other. And he's like, oh, of course, he completely gets it. So that's really good. They eventually say their official goodbyes. Everything is good. And then following this, what does end up happening is that they travel through time. Actually, what I'm trying to remember now is, they actually try to insert the virus into that ship so that Orion can spread the virus throughout the Armada ships. The thing is that eventually, after Orion does disappear, what does end up happening is that they travel back to the future, actually to the time of the Alliance. Time where the Alliance is there, which is during the Legendary Battle. And the thing is that the Legendary Battle is happening, and they see all these massive blasts and attacks occurring. They see Orion's ship, which Troy is on it, and Troy and Orion jump off the ship to go and fight Emperor Mavro. They end up having a huge battle with him. What they also discover is that apparently all these Armada ships have actually doubled in strength, and so what they have to make sure to do is actually make the main ship release the energy from this, the main ship has to release the Venjix virus throughout the system, and the thing is that Orion ship has been crashed into and destroyed, so obviously they can't use that ship again. So what ends up happening is that Chloe jumps down to the ship. She ends up trying to put in the virus, and at the same time Orion and Troy end up fighting Emperor Mavro. The typical fight that actually happened in the Legendary Battle occurs with Emperor Mavro. In the meantime, what does end up happening is that Chloe and Vesper work together. Vesper actually sends the Venjix virus to Chloe's morpher, which ends up sending it through the system and allowing it so that it could be spread, and that leads to major destruction. In the meantime, what does end up happening is that the Rangers are confronted by the Alliance leader. The Alliance leader initially sends them a transmission saying that things are really bad and expect the worst, of course. And eventually, when the virus is spread, she ends up saving Troy and Orion's lives, and they end up returning back to Earth as the In-Space Rangers that they were in the actual episode. So they turn back as the In-Space Silver Ranger and the In-Space Red Ranger, and they travel back on their boards. And then from there, what happens is that Chloe is teleported out. What we do also see is that Velkanos and Scorpina were in 2 of the Armada ships, and what happens is that the Armada ships stop working because of the Venjix virus, so they actually get teleported back to the Alliance ship. And following this, the Rangers decide to go help the Legendary Rangers, because it turns out the battle that's occurring on Earth, they manage to destroy the Emperor, but they don't manage to destroy all the X-Borgs and all the Bruisers that appear. So at that point, they decide to teleport to Earth. We see several cool attacks, such as Eddie doing a blue explosion where he has Mighty Morphin Blue, Zeo Blue, In-Space Blue, Super Mega Force Blue, or is it Super Mega Force Blue, and himself doing a major attack. We also see other combinations such as the Green Samurai Ranger being used at one point, which is pretty cool. What else is there? I'm trying to see here what I find. Jack ends up helping the In-Space Pink Ranger at one point. Yeah, Marv helps the Green Samurai Ranger, because what happens is that he hears Dr. O's Kia attack, but the thing is that in reality it's the Green Samurai Ranger, and it sounds similar. And they do end up seeing Dr. O, and Dr. O recognizes Chloe at one point, but basically says, get away, you shouldn't be seen here, you're not allowed to be here. And so that's kind of important. What does end up happening also is that eventually Vesper and the MMPR Black Ranger, which is presumed to be Zack just because of the fact that Zeo Green was also there, that most likely the 2 of them ended up teaming up together, which is very cool. What else is there? The Hyperforce Rangers eventually do end up talking to Orion after everything is done. They confirm with each other that things are good. Orion initially was considering actually going back to his home planet, and he was offered the chance to so he can rebuild it. But Orion says instead he's going to stay on Earth and help out the Rangers that are there right now. So that's obviously very important. Orion also initially was planning on bringing back Troy's sword that he leaves in the ground at the end of the Legendary Battle, but instead he decides to hold on to it. Marv wants it though. The Rangers also go back to their ships afterwards, and that's about it. This episode overall, there were some other things here and there that were brought up. The Legendary Battle, very cool. The beginning with the Andrasia stuff, I like that. Again, I kind of sum things up in a shorthand way just because I feel like there's a lot going on, but I don't need to go over all this stuff because some of this stuff is just sort of it's straightforward points. Overall, this episode was very exciting. It's probably one of the better episodes regarding guests, I would say. If you're wondering what that noise is, it's actually a truck that passed by, so that's why I kind of quieted down for a minute there, because I wanted to wait for it to pass by. I might cut that out. It might just be there. So if you're wondering like what that loud noise was right there, it's just because there was a huge truck by. So overall, I was very happy about this episode. I thought they did a great job. Apparently from here, we'll be getting several more announcements regarding several things for Power Rangers Hyperforce, and just in general how things will go with the series. Most likely that could lead to some exciting guests getting announced, so who knows who that could be. It's very unclear. I would imagine probably in the next couple of episodes we should be going to the time of In Space, because that's one that's pretty likely to happen at some point. It's not clear when. Overall, this episode just did a lot of really great things. Cameron Jebbo, he actually was pretty cool. I mean, he wasn't the most like overall engaged in everything, but he had some really great moments, and I enjoyed him. I enjoyed his presence a lot. I thought he did a good job, and he was a fun actor. It would have been nice if he were a little bit more engaging at times, but at the same time, I mean, for the character that he's playing and for what they kind of did with him, I'm not gonna complain at all. I think that he had a pretty fitting role overall. It's good also that we got a season that's from the Nick era. Not because Nick eras is one of the best eras, but just in general because of the fact that every era has been represented in some way, pretty much. So it's kind of good to know that like that finally can be said that it actually happened. Because we've had Mighty Morphin, Dino Thunder, Time Force, RPM, Super Mega Force, Mystic Force, SPD, all these different iterations have been used, but it's always good to know that like everything is accounted for, even if it's not like full-on detail, big explanation. If there's something, that's always important. What also does end up happening, I forgot to mention, this is a small point, at one point Vesper was going to actually give away her dog, Rito, but she actually decides against it because that would ruin the timeline and problems would happen there, and yeah, you get the point. So it's all interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to next week's episode with the Shadow Grid stuff. That will be very cool. I'm very curious to see how that will work. I'm also wondering if that will be a one-off kind of situation where it will have nothing to do with what's going on, or will it be the situation where it will happen that episode and then the following episode will be a continuation where it will acknowledge stuff that occurred in Shadow Grid. We don't even know if that will be the case yet. I'd be very curious to see if that is the case, but we'll have to wait and see in the end how they're going to do things. I'm definitely excited to see where things will go from here. The fact that we are going to a Shadow Grid universe, very, very cool. Something tells me it probably will continue with the story, and rather than just being a one-off situation, which is fine. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that will actually work out in the end. But yeah, just in general, very excited. I know I'm saying that over and over again just because it's been a while since we've gotten a bunch of announcements for Hyperforce, and the fact that we're getting a lot of news now makes me pretty happy, because I've been uncertain as to what the status is with merchandise and popularity of the show as of late, because the first half of the show really showed a lot of love, and there still is a ton of love being shown for Power Rangers Hyperforce. But as far as things go with the greater attention and the hype that was being received really, really early on, it's been very unclear as of late, because it hasn't been the same, at least not in broad strokes. It hasn't been to the same extent as it once was. So it's really nice to see that this episode really showed things in a much better light and makes me much more hopeful for things for the future for Power Rangers Hyperforce. Second season, still a possibility. Other conventions like Power Morphicon happening, the fact that WonderCon's going to have these Rangers appearing at it for this signing makes me hopeful that Power Morphicon could happen, maybe having a cast panel or something cool like that occur. You never know, but I think that that's a very cool thing that we're hearing all this stuff, and it makes me very, very hopeful for some very cool things to happen in the near future. We'll just have to wait and see in the end what does end up occurring. But, it's all good stuff. It's just, we have to wait. We have to hope for good things. One other thing that I wanted to mention, this is the last thing I wanted to say. Melissa from Saban Brands, she confirmed something that has been a problem with some people that aren't really sure as to what Power Rangers Hyperforce is regarding canon or not. It is canon in its own, it's canon to itself. That's the thing to understand. And by that, it means it's similar to the Boom Studios comics. It's similar to the movie. They are canon to themselves. They have inspirations from the show, but they are their own thing. That's what their canon is. So keep that in mind if you've been questioning the canon aspect to it. They are legit. They are sponsored by Saban Brands and everything like that. But they're canon to themselves. So that doesn't mean that they're a fan project or some fake thing. They're legit, but they're legit to themselves, and that's very important. And people still get that confused and are still uncertain as to as to how things work. So just keep that in mind if you have been wondering, or if you've been asking around and you're saying to yourself, I don't know if I should watch this. This sounds like a fake thing or not. No. It's not fake. It's real. It's just not what you might have expected. So keep that in mind. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I love to know your opinions. I know this video was, about the same as it's been for a couple of the more recent episodes, but this time around we got some guest announcements and some other things going on that are just very exciting, and I can't wait to see next week's episode. I just can't wait to see where things will go from here. We only have 7 more weeks of episodes, so keep that in mind as well. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe again, and goodbye, guys.